Hola Comadres, welcome to another episode of Comadreando podcast. I'm your host Marcy, and we have a dope guest here today. Her name is Kiara. I will let her introduce herself. Who are you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kiara Luna. I am a mental health therapist. I am a public speaker. I am a mom. I'm a wife. I'm all of it. I'm also a new published author. My very first book, Becoming a New You. And yeah, that's who I am.
Awesome. Okay. And Kiara and I connected because I made connections with Jose from Trilo. And he was like telling me about her and her new book and everything. And I was like, she sounds like somebody that really is aligned with my brand and like what I'm trying to accomplish right now with the podcast. So I was like, let me just bring her on. And then I want to introduce today's topic, which is therapy in communities of color. So the reason why this topic came up is because I felt like it was something that should be addressed. Your book is doing a large part of like, talking about that part. And I've done a few episodes on dating, but I've not had yet the pleasure of bringing somebody who does relationship therapy as well. So we're gonna talk a little bit about everything, right? And why it's important to have therapy to deal with our traumas in the past. Okay,
Yeah,
so let's get into the topic.
let's
Tell me
do
about
it.
the work you do regarding therapy in communities of color.
Yeah. So a lot of the work that I do in my private practice, so I'm also the owner of New You Psychotherapy. It's a private practice. I just started January. And a lot of the work that I do is working on childhood trauma, working and addressing anxiety, depression, a lot of work, a lot of cognitive behavioral work, right? So really focusing on how also our thoughts impact our behaviors and our emotions. So really also learning and teaching really how to rewire your brain and how to be more empowered, knowing that you have control over your thoughts and how much they dictate the way that your emotions are and your thoughts are. I also work on self esteem. I work with a lot of women on addressing self esteem. I work with a lot of couples as well, so addressing issues in the relationship, uh, patterns of behaviors that show up in the relationship often, miscommunication, and I always bring back the childhood traumas into the relationship because a lot of those things typically repeat in our relationships, and a lot of us are not aware that we are not aware to make that link that, oh wow, like a lot of these characteristics actually were the ones that were showing up for me during childhood. So when we do make those connections, a lot of my couples really become closer together because they now feel more empathy towards the pain that they are uh, making their partners go through.
That's so amazing. It's important. Like, it's funny. Like people are like, "Oh no, you're like just bringing things up from your past, and it has nothing to do with your present." But a lot of those traumas that we carry with us from our past continue to show up in relationships, and they create patterns, like you said, right? And unless you're cognizant of that, like those triggers and things that um, you know, come up from your youth, you're gonna be bound to keep repeating and going out and dating the same type of people.
Absolutely. And, in our culture, you know how it is. Our parents
Hmm.
don't want to talk about anything that have to do
No,
with
of
anything
course.
negative. So it's really complicated for a lot of us to even be able to receive some validation because we are afraid that we're going to be met with anger, frustration, or invalidation, right? So I know if I bring something up, right, to my mom about childhood, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, ¿qué que tú estás hablando, muchacha? Ya eso pasó hace años. Like, what's the point
Yeah.
of you bringing this up? And I'm like, well, I want some validation. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
And
like
it's really hard. It's really hard.
and then bringing those things up, it's like, oh, why are you stirring the pot? Like, why are we talking about this now? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I just want to tell the listeners that it is, your feelings are valid. And your experience, just because somebody didn't see it that way while you were growing up, does not invalidate your experience. Because, like,
Exactly.
even siblings in the same household could have experienced two completely different sides of the spectrum, of the relationship with their parents, as opposed to, the other sibling, right? The other sibling might have
Yeah.
had an easier time, or it might have been a completely different experience than what you were going through. Because remember, like, and I know you can probably uh chime in on this, but everybody's experience is internal, right? Like, the things can be happening, we can all be experiencing the same thing, but it all affects how we're doing mental health wise, and where we're at. you know my me experiencing the things that I experienced in my past as a child, experiencing it now with the things that I've been through, would be a completely different person experiencing them, even if it is the same situation, same environment, and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And reality is that, as children, we all perceive information differently. Even as adults, we still, like, you and I can go read the same book, and if somebody asks you, "Hey, how do you think that book was?" You would
Hmm.
probably say, "Oh, it was great." And somebody would ask me, I'm like, "Oh no, I didn't like it." So totally different experiences despite living the same experience. So that's the same thing that happens to us during childhood.
So I wanted to ask you another question. So can you tell me your thoughts about the importance of doing the healing work before jumping into a relationship?
Yes. So I have like two answers for this question,
Yeah,
right?
go.
Because so part of me, I do believe that it's important to get to know yourself and get to know what your triggers are as much as you can,
Hmm.
to really further understand, what are some of the things that might need some work, right? Because we have all adapted a lot of maladaptive coping skills
Hmm.
from our childhood, right? We had to in order to survive, right? So I always give this little thing, and I even include it in my book, which is we all are born with needs, right? Emotional needs, mental needs, physical needs. And unfortunately, our parents are not always able to meet all of those needs for us,
Hmm.
right? So what do? We have to figure out how to live in that environment, right? Without getting that need met. So what I do is I mold myself into something else so I'm able to survive in that environment, right? So the example I always give is, men are not supposed to cry, right? So whenever, boys were crying, they were always sent to their room or always made to feel uh like they were being girls, like, oh, you're not a
Hmm.
girl, stop crying, right?
Yeah.
So now the little boy has to learn how to literally stop expressing feelings and emotions, because now every time I do this, my mom is going to be upset or I'm going to be screamed at,
Understand.
right?
Hmm.
So now I have to not cry anymore, or at least not cry in front of my mom. So now I'm here. I learned that, well, suppressing my feelings was actually a good thing, right? So now I'm older, I'm an older man, and what happens now, I have difficulties expressing my feelings because that's not something that was practiced during childhood, right? So here I am now. I molded myself, and I have this thing, but a lot of us, we're not aware that of these maladaptive coping skills, right? Because that's what we had to do to survive, so we continue to behave the same way because we think that's the best way to behave today, right? So at times it's really important that we do the work prior to jumping into a relationship, because when we jump into a relationship, that conflict is going to come up. I mean, we know when we date emotionless men, right, that it's really hard. We feel like they're cold, they're not getting us, we're like, you don't love me,
Hmm.
you don't show any type of emotion whenever there's conflict or anything like that, right? uh so it's important, but at the same time I also have a different response, because I also feel that sometimes we do the most growth in relationships, right?
Yeah.
And also in our intimate relationships, because there's nothing else that's going to challenge me more than my partner, right? That's where I'm really going to notice, like, oh my goodness, I have all these triggers, right? But now I also have to be conscious about those things, right? About these triggers that are coming up, and it's not just me blaming my partner for them, but it's also me doing the homework to really figure out for myself how come these are triggers for me, what's going on. And the issue is that a lot of us don't do that. We just focus on the fighting, on the blaming, and not really doing the homework for ourselves to figure out, okay, what's going on, how come this is something for me, what's going on for me.
Yeah, being conscious of those triggers is important because, like, it might not be exactly what your partner is doing or saying. It, like, whatever feeling comes up is not necessarily directed at whatever it is that they did. It's more like you're upset about how that's making you feel, but, like, really digging into why it's making you feel that way, and, like, being
Yeah.
more conscious of it because things are gonna happen.
Right. Yeah. And then, we also do the most healing in our relationships because when, for example, in couples therapy, when we come and we kind of unpack all of these childhood traumas and we realize, that, oh my goodness, you are literally speaking to me the same way that dad used to speak to me. This is why this is so triggering. Or you lecture me just like dad used to lecture me. So of course this is a trigger for me. And I stonewall and I shut down, right? And I can't speak anymore
Hmm.
because I'm so overwhelmed with my feelings. Then we have something to go off of. Then we can really make do the work, the healing work, right? Because now
Hmm.
the partner is going to know what to do in order to help her hit his or her partner heal from that experience, right? So now I'm going to actually not lecture you anymore, right? So now
Yeah.
I'm going to really work with you on how to have conflict discussions in a healthier manner and also validate your experience.
Yeah, and to communicate in a way that you're gonna understand and you're gonna receive the message that I'm trying to communicate to you.
Right.
One thing that I found when I was going to therapy and doing the healing work before I started dating again was that it was very hard for me to accept help from people,
Mm,
right?
yes.
As being an older sibling and the a girl in our culture, it is expected that we are number two in line, right? So for me, when I have a partner that wants to help me, I'm like, nah, 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 I got it. Or let's say they don't know how to help me. I didn't know how to ask for help, you know, and there would be like a like kind of like a guilt when I did need help, which is big. Like like even saying it now, I'm like, wow. But it's crazy
Yes.
because, like, I let the people that I'm dating know, like, I'm not used to asking for help, and if you see that I'm overwhelmed, like, I'm okay with you stepping in.
Yeah, and growing up, we were taught that asking for help was for the weak. You're not supposed to ask for
Yeah.
help. You're supposed to figure it out. Like if you need help, it's because you can't do it by yourself. And if you can't do it by yourself, oh my God, what does that mean about you? you
Mhm.
know
Mhm.
so we are already so used to like putting all this pressure on us, being superwoman, so independent, we don't need nobody, type of thing. And in reality, we are just making ourselves suffer more because we're putting so much pressure on ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we have our partners feeling like they like we don't need them. So now it's also, how are they receiving that message? Because I know that I had the same experience. I also would, I got it all figured out. I don't need nobody. I'm independent, I don't need no
Mhm.
help, you know? And I remember like my husband was like, okay, hold on. I'm here too. Like, I can help you, like, what
Mhm.
do you need me to do? And, I realized like, oh my goodness, like he's right. And this is the same things that I discuss with my couples and individuals too, is that it's okay to let other people help you.
Mhm.
But then it's also figuring out for them their own experience as to how come it's so scary to ask for help, right? Because a lot of people grew up in environments where they would ask for help, but they never got the help they wanted. So now what they learned was, well, every time that I ask for help, I'm still not getting helped. So what's the point of asking? So now it's, everybody has different experiences. So really unpacking for every individual, what was your experience and how come that has led you to behave the way that you behave today? And then when they realize that, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually putting all this pressure on me for no reason, they start to practice. Like, you know what, I love giving homework. I'm that therapist. I'm giving you homework every week, you know, because I need you. I always say to them, you come to see me here for 45 minutes, an hour and 15 for couples. This is not enough. This is just a portion, literally, of your week. You know, you have a whole life to live outside of the session. And just because you come here and you speak to me, if you don't practice the tools that we are practicing here, and that we are also that you're learning, then you're paying me for no reason. You know, so I'm very transparent with my clients too. I let
I
them
love
know.
that. I love that. So, one going into kind of like that was a good segue. So going into doing the work and healing together. Why is it important to set and enforce boundaries?
Boundaries. Boundaries are so important. So boundaries are so important. Boundaries are I always see boundaries as a foundation. A lot of it as a foundation of our personality, right? Because it's based on our values, it's based on the things that we believe in, it's based on our morals, it's based on the rules and expectations that we want to set in every relationship, right? And every relationship is so different. So, one of the reasons why setting boundaries is so important is because one, it lets the person know what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, you know, and it also informs that person of just what you expect, you know, and what your limitations are. And sometimes we're so scared of letting people know those things because we feel like they're going to walk away from our life, or they're going to think that we're being too much. And the honest truth is that if we don't communicate those things to them, then we're always going to be in relationships where we feel that we're either being taken advantage of, or maybe that, you know, again, that our needs are not being met the way that we want them to. So it's just so many different experiences that people feel when they are not communicating their boundaries, and typically it's just it leads to you not feeling satisfied.
So one thing that I feel people have issues with is communicating, like reinstate not reinstating, but like restating their boundaries when they feel like their boundary has been violated. Like, what would you advise someone? Let's say that let's say the boundary is like, if I'm with my family, I would not like to be, getting phone calls or whatever the case may be. And the person that they're with violates that boundary. Like, what would be like a healthy way to communicate that feeling? Because I feel like that's the biggest thing for some people is
Hmm.
communicating how they're feeling without attacking or like making that other
Yeah,
person feel like they're attacking them.
yeah, sure. So I would say something like, you know, Marcy, I recall having a conversation with you in regards to our boundaries, or in regards to this specific boundary. For example, using your phone, and our family time together, and it really hurts my feelings when you are on your phone and we have this and when we are having family time. Uh, that was the example, Marcy, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's good.
Okay. So really expressing the feeling, right? Really expressing how that action makes you feel, and also the fact that, you know, we had this conversation prior, and it's a little bit frustrating to me because it seems that, you know, this keeps on repeating, right? So really being honest about the feeling that you're feeling because of the action,
Hmm.
right? Now, the scary part of this, of communicating boundaries, sometimes is because you're afraid of how the other person's going to react, right? You at times feel that the person might meet you with anger, frustration,
Hmm.
or misunderstanding. So a lot of people don't like sharing their boundaries with other people again and again and again because they just feel like they're constantly going to be invalidated and not understood.
So we already talked about a little bit about childhood trauma and how it shows up in relationships in adulthood. I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit, like expound on that a little bit more. So what I'm saying is that we already talked about a little bit about childhood traumas and how they show up in relationships. Can you give like like some examples of like behaviors, maladaptive behaviors that people develop to deal with those childhood traumas?
Yeah, so let's see. Let's think of a few. So here we spoke about men, right? So let's talk about abandonment, fear of abandonment, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, let's say that during childhood, my dad left at an early age, or mom left at an early age, and I felt abandoned. I can also feel abandoned because a older sibling left the home without really communication. So there's a lot of reasons, right? But let's stick to that one. So let's say I have a fear of abandonment. Now, I grew up being kind of feeling like people would always leave, and they would never stay. So what I would typically do now in relationships is, it's many different things. It can show up very, very differently for everybody, right? But let's say one example can be when we get into conflict and you're not responding, or you want to leave the conversation, I get very anxious and I begin to call you constantly, or not let you leave the apartment, or let's say I text and text and text because I want to respond. And what this does is, and I'm doing this because I'm so scared of losing you, right? But the way that it's showing up is as if I'm kind of like suffocating my partner, right?
Mm.
So the very thing that I'm afraid of happening, which is you walking away, is what I'm causing by the behavior that I am exhibiting.
Wow.
Make sense? Yeah, it's so when we speak about that and we kind of break it down in that sense, really, really, people are like, oh my goodness, like now it kind of makes sense now as to why you know I may do these things.
So does that have to do with attachment styles? Because I read a little bit about attachment styles, but I didn't do like a lot of research on it. So is that like a what is it? A anxious attachment style, or
Yeah.
does that have to do with abandonment issues most of the time, or does it have to do with different things?
Different things develop, different type of attachment styles, definitely. There's also the let's say, like, people pleasing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
people always say, and I speak about people pleasing also in my book, and it's about, okay, but how does that develop, right? Like, what happens? And again, many different things can happen to develop people pleasing in people, right? But there is different circumstances. Let's say that my mom or my parents, caretakers, emotions are all over the place all the time. So I don't know which mom I'm going to get. So now, in order for me, what I found that works for me is that if I I'm always kind of doing everything my mom likes that makes her happy, then she's okay, and I'm not going to get in trouble, or I'm not going to be picked on for little things, right? So I'm always pleasing my mom. And then what happens is, what that taught me is that, well, I have to always please people, be in tune with other people's needs all the time in order to, be safe and be okay. So then that also disconnects the child from their own needs and desires and wants, because now they're so hyper vigilant about the needs of those caretakers, so he could be safe or she could be safe.
Jesus, you're like blowing my mind. My brain is like, whoa. Um, no, seriously, because it's like, and then those people, the people pleasers, tend to get like really exhausted, right? From like constantly being hyper
Yes.
vigilant of the other person's needs, and
Yes.
neglecting their own. They end up being tired in relationships because of it.
Yes, and resentful, and so
Yeah.
resentful, because there is this other, self-sacrifice maladaptive schema that a lot of women have. A lot of us have this self-sacrifice, right? Like the doing for everybody. We are good at being,
Mm-hmm.
because we were taught to be good moms, to be good wives, to be good daughters, to be good to everybody except ourselves, right? So here
Yeah.
we are doing everything and being great to everybody else, but we're not being great to ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that self-sacrifice shows up so much in relationships too, because then we are so in tune with what our partners need, and we are not in tune with, and we're not getting anything, but then we also live up to that self-sacrifice sometimes
Mm-hmm.
because we overdo things. People are not asking us to do anything for them, but we are voluntarily doing it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then a little bit of us is like a little part of us is really resentful because we're
Mm-hmm.
not getting that same thing in return. We're not
Attention
getting those
and
same, yeah, we're not getting those the same affection, or the same energy that we're putting in. We feel like we're not getting. So because of that, we get resentful.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, it's not crazy. It's great. Like it's good that we're talking about it. No, because
Yeah.
it's really funny how relationships from your childhood keep showing up in your regular
Yes.
relationships. You know, and
Yeah.
then on another episode that I had, I was talking about, you know, not only do we have a father wound as women, but we also have a mother wound, right?
Yeah.
There's
Mm-hmm.
things that the relationship with our mother affects how we go on. The relationship with our mother shows up in so many different ways, but especially how we relate to authority,
Mm.
right? I've noticed that I hate being micromanaged, and it was because of the way that I was raised. You know, I
Yeah.
wasn't I wasn't allowed to just kind of be. It was kind of like every minute of every day, somebody was on top of me telling me what to do. Right. So when I'm in a work environment that's like that, I have a hard time adapting to that kind of work environment, you know? But I
Yeah.
already know that now. And I know where it's
Mm-hmm.
coming from. So when I see that I am in a work environment that's like that, I usually, you know, call it not call it quits, but like find another place to be that is more
Yeah.
my style of management.
Yeah, it's tough right now. It's tough to be micromanaged. I mean, I don't think anybody. I mean, some people need it. Fine. Some people do say that they need it. I just feel that micromanaging is not the best style because you're not letting someone grow, right? Like if I'm
Mhm.
telling you every step of the way how you have to do something and what to do and I'm not letting you grow because I'm not letting you actually use your brain and think
Mhm.
about how you think you can solve the issue, you know? So a lot of us who had parents that were strict and always told us what to do and didn't give us space to think absolutely don't do well with micromanagers.
No, like I used to work corporate, and at one point I was like, I can't do this anymore. I fucking hate it here.
Yeah.
No, it was really bad. Okay, so in that same vein of like childhood and all that, if you could go back and tell your 10-year-old self anything, what would you tell her?
Mhm. Wow, my 10-year-old self. Let me think. I remember that around 9, 10 years old, I made a promise to myself, and it was to never cry again. I remember that I said to myself, I'm never going to cry again, and I'm going to be strong, and I'm going to like, what did I say to myself? And I said that I was going to just make sure that I wasn't gonna cry anymore. Like that was my thing because I felt like I was crying so much. Like I always felt like I wasn't being heard as a child, and every time that I tried like speaking up how
Mm,
I felt, I was
mm-hmm,
always met with anger and frustration, and like I was always shut down. Right.
mm-hmm,
So I remember myself like going to my room and crying and being like, I'm never gonna cry again, and I'm never gonna do this again, and I'm never going to say anything else about this. Right. And I would tell myself now like that it was Kiara, it's gonna be okay. And don't stop speaking your truth. Like don't stop speaking about your feelings. Like I would tell her not to stop. And I would tell her to continue to speak her truth, even though she was not being heard. Even though I know now that that would have been really difficult. But that's what I would have told her. I would have told her, keep on being in tune with your feelings.
I would probably tell myself, my 10-year-old self, to just continue to be my authentic self. I was very much like a creative child, and one of my things was like I used to love to create, like do different like drawing and painting and all that stuff. And there was like a point that there came that I was like seriously considering it as a career. And there came a point that somebody told me like, you're not gonna make any money like that. Like stop.
Mm.
You need to think about something more lucrative that's gonna make you money, and you're gonna be able to, you know, bring the family up and all these other things, you know. I would probably tell myself not to stop drawing or creating.
Mm. So you
Yeah.
feel like that was kind of and like how do you feel like that part of yourself was died down?
No, it was like basically I was told that I was not going to make any money, that I should consider doing other things, to be more quote unquote realistic.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like a lot, like that was like a large part of myself, and then that was like something that I shouldn't have walked away from. Like it was to a point that I was like writing and drawing and doing all these great things, and I thought they were great, but the people around me, like the adults around me, didn't support that. So I didn't feel supported in that sense, at least artistically.
Yeah, it's so sad too how at times in childhood like, they kill our curiosity,
Mhm.
right? Because you know how as children we ask so many questions.
Mhm.
Right? No, what's this? What's that? And we are typically met with, okay, you asking too many questions. We stop, oh my gosh. Like, and then what that teaches us is that asking questions is a bad thing.
Mhm.
So now we grow up and we are in meetings at work and we're shy to ask a question.
Yeah. Not only that, but then it's like, yeah, like I was like into, like I really wanted to know like what it was like for my mother growing up, or my dad growing up, or
Mm.
grandma when she was growing up, So I would always ask these like weird questions, like, so tell me about your childhood. And I'm actually like really like genuinely interested, and it was kind of like, muchacha, tú sí jodes, así okay. Like sometimes, like if they were in
Yes.
a good mood, they would answer, but like for the most part, it was kind of like, oh, ¿qué es lo que tú quieres saber? Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it's funny. All right.
No, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. I do the same. I honestly like I take a notebook and I'm like, okay, mommy, I'm gonna ask you a bunch of questions, and then I just start like asking her questions, and then when I'm like to question five, she's like, "Pero ¿y qué es lo que tú estás haciendo, mi hija? Porque que yo no entiendo." And I'm like, "Mommy, I just want to get to know like what you went through, so I can understand you more."
Yeah, no, I know, and I feel like that's important, right? Like if you know a little bit more about somebody's past, it gives you more. It helps you give them more grace,
Exactly.
and you're more forgiving.
It,
One of
it,
the Go ahead.
no, I'm so sorry. I was just going to say that it provides us with the opportunity to be empathetic, because the thing is that we cannot empathize with what we don't understand,
Mm-hmm.
so we can have a lot of opinions about people, but not until I understand your what you've been through, I'm
Your
able to
truth.
empathize with you, right? Your truth. And people don't understand that. That's why in our culture it's, there's a lot of criticism, there's a lot of judgments,
Yeah.
and I don't like it. I feel like, one, that's not productive. I mean, what am I sitting here criticizing anybody for? Sit down and criticize your own self,
Yep.
right? Because the criticisms that you're saying are just a reflection of your own stuff. So when you start speaking like that to people, they're like, "What? No, I'm okay. Like, what are you talking about?"
I'm perfect. What are you talking about?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that yeah, that the more we know about people, about their story, the better it is, because we can empathize with them.
In one of the episodes with Dr. Griselda Rodriguez, she's one of the ladies from Brujas of Brooklyn. She says that if they mothered us like that, imagine how they were mothered, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
it like it helps you give them grace and like, forgive them, because at the end of the day, I know for a fact that if they would have known better, they would have done better, but they didn't know any better,
Absolutely. They did
you
the
know?
best they could, just like we are right now. Trust me and believe me, our kids tomorrow are going to grow up with something.
Mhm.
Something. And it goes back to the perception, right? To we don't know how they're perceiving things you
Yes.
know and as a mom myself, I try to have a lot of conversations with my 11-year-old about life, and about the
Mhm.
things that I do, and even my actions and my flaws. And I ask him too, like, what would you change about me if you could. So I ask him questions just to to let him know that I care about his opinion, even about me, because I also want him to know that you need to receive feedback from people in order to grow and be better, from people you trust and love.
That's amazing. I love that. That's so
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Another random question is, if you could give one piece of advice to newly single people
Mm,
who are coming out of a long-term relationship, what would that be?
that's a good question. I would say take your time. Take your time to be with yourself. Develop a healthy relationship with yourself first. Um, get in tune with your own needs, thoughts, emotions, reflect on what worked for you and what didn't work in that relationship, you know, reflect on your own maladaptive ways of relating to people and relationships. Uh, do a lot of reading, listen to a lot of podcasts, love yourself. Pay attention to how you speak to yourself too, right? Like how do I treat myself? You
Hmm.
know, because I think that a lot of us expect a lot of things from other people, but that we do not give ourselves. You know, so we expect people to, I don't know, give us love and affection and speak to us nice, and then when you ask them, how do you speak to yourself when you are upset, they stop and they're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty mean to myself, and yeah, I don't show myself love, and yeah, I don't actually think, like, I'm not gentle with myself. And when they realize that, I'm like, okay, so let's do some work there, because it's unfair for us to expect other people to give the things that we're not giving to ourselves, you
I
know.
say that all the time. It's important because the thing is, like, you know, people come into relationships with these grandiose ideas of, well, I want to be doted on and I want to be this and that, which is fine.
Hmm.
But do you do that for yourself? Do you dote on
Right.
yourself? Do you treat yourself nicely? Do you speak words of affirmation to yourself? Do you uplift yourself? And
Yes.
a lot of people don't. And or like, even I've seen women that are in the mirror and they're like berating themselves because they don't look how they think they're supposed to look. But then they have a
Hmm.
partner, that doesn't do, like, maybe they don't speak badly to them, but doesn't say anything about their appearance, and you wonder why, and it's the internal, that internal voice is like everything, honestly.
Yeah, it is. And realizing too that a lot of us adopted that same self-talk from our parents, right? From our caretakers, how they used to speak to us, right? How, even if we were bullied in school or anything like that, right? We adapt those ways of speaking and we internalize them. And literally, this is like, there's research out there that shows that when we hit our teenage years, we say, oh, espérate, wait a minute.
Hmm.
I'm going to take all of these external voices and I'm going to now internalize them. And now
Hmm.
I'm going to call myself those things. This way, when you tell me those things, when you call me names or you speak to me in a way that makes me feel not good enough, that's not going to impact me as hard because I already know those things about myself,
Damn.
you know? So now that happens, that when I, and also another thing that I always say to my clients to pay attention to, and we unpack, is characteristics of your caretakers, because a lot of those characteristics that we really really dislike, we have ourselves, right? So it's important to also pay attention
Yeah.
to those things.
So it's like a mirror, right? Like, you the things that get on your nerves about other people, it's
Yeah.
literally the things that you don't like about yourself. So if you meet somebody and they just like irk your nerves to, like, you're just like, oh, this person, God, I can't stand them. You have to look at yourself and see, like, if something of them, whatever it is that's annoying you, is something that annoys you about yourself. And you have
Yeah.
to sit with it and kind of like really think about it. Because a lot of the time, we're just, when you're not conscious of things, you're just going through the motions and you're just like a little robot every day in and day out, receiving things and not really internalizing and like really looking at things with a clear eye. Once you get to that conscious level of like thinking, you
Hmm.
can look at things and see them for what they are.
Exactly. And it's I talk a lot about the subconscious and the role that it plays in our life, right? And
Hmm.
how dangerous it can be if we're not if we're not aware of what could be there, right? If we're not aware of what our underlying negative beliefs could be or limiting beliefs could be, right? Because if we don't recognize those things, we would continue to behave the same way, over and over again. We will continue to attract the same things in life over and over again, because there is a set of behaviors. There's a certain way that we're behaving that continue to attract those same people. And if we're not able to link back to those negative beliefs that we may have about ourselves, whether that
Mhm.
is I'm unlovable, or I'm a failure, or I'm not good enough, or you know if we're not able to identify those things for ourselves, we will continue to again behave the same ways and attract the same people and attract the same situations.
Yeah.
And yeah, it would just be a cycle until we're able to stop, think, right? And
Mhm.
rewire this mind and brain, because the mind is so powerful. People don't realize that. And literally, like, our words are the programming to our mind, like our
Yeah.
mind follows what we say. If I say that I cannot do this, trust me, you won't be able to do it.
Mhm.
You're telling yourself you can't do it,
I tell my
but
students that all the time.
yeah, but if you think about it, and I recall realizing this too, like, so early on, because I would always say in high school, I hate science. I'm so bad at science, but I'm great at
Mm.
math. I'm great at math. And then I
Mhm.
realized that I was like, wait a minute, what happens if I was to change the way I'm speaking? If I were to say that I'm good at science, And I started, my grades started going up. So it is really a mind thing. And it's the way that we speak. If I'm saying every day that I am not beautiful, that I'm ugly, I don't like how I look, I don't like, you would never like how you look,
Mhm.
you know? So you have to, and people always push me back with, well, I don't believe it, Kiara. I don't believe it. I'm like, okay, I don't need you to believe it that. You didn't grow up. You weren't born believing that you were ugly. You weren't
Mhm.
born believing that you had these imperfections. Experiences happened in your life that made you feel that way and made you think that now. So you adapted that thinking. The same way you adapted that thinking, you can adapt a new thinking,
Yes.
right? So the mind is powerful, and we can do whatever we put our minds to. We
I
can.
love that the study of the brain and frequencies and like, how we can make things happen, just by, changing our mindset and changing the way that we perceive things. It's so interesting to me. It's like one of
It
my favorite
is.
things to study.
Yeah, I love it.
So, what is something you could share that no one really knows about you?
Ooh, look at this
I feel like we're
question.
playing like 21 questions, like, hmm.
One thing I can share that people don't really know about me. I would say, of course, people that are close to me know this information, but I don't think that people and the world know this information, like, out there. It's not out there, but it would be that my 6-year-old son was diagnosed with autism when he was a year and 9 months. Nine
Wow.
months. Yeah. So I have a little one on the spectrum.
So, how has that been for you?
How has that been for me? At first it was really hard because I didn't
Hmm.
know what would happen. I didn't know what to expect. And, I've been in the field for so long, so which really helped me catch on those, like, those red flags, that, or those signs, really, right? That
Hmm.
that tell you, like, something's not, hold on. And at that time I was also working with children. So I was
Mm.
already around it, so I knew. So I remember that I started noticing, lack of eye contact, and he started regressing. At first he was responding to his name, then he was not responding to his name. And I remember me telling my husband, like, I think something's going on. I think that he, might be autistic. But then, like, when you're saying it, because one thing is to work in the field and another thing is to live through it, it's so
Yeah.
different. So something in my heart was something, my brain, my logical brain was saying, like, yes, like, absolutely. My emotional brain did not want to accept that. It was like, no, maybe not. Nah, that's just me looking too much into it. Right. But then when I started seeing, I remember that, like, again, like, things were happening that just, like, again, signs after signs after signs. So I remember speaking to his PCP and getting him evaluated. He was like, the evaluation started at a year, when he was a year and 6 months.
Hmm.
And ya para a year, when he hit a year and 9 months, I remember that he was evaluated completely by everyone, the psychologist and everybody. And I remember receiving the call. Did I receive the call? She came. No, she came to the home. And at the end of the evaluation, she told me, like, yeah, mom, like, he's on the spectrum. And she couldn't really tell me, like, where, because what did she say? I don't
Like
recall
the
what she
percentage of
said.
delay she couldn't tell you.
Yes, she couldn't tell me, yeah, because maybe it was too early. They needed to do more, like, go and
Hmm.
evaluate the responses on everything they had, all the assessments. But she kind of said, like, yeah, like, it's very probable that he is. And I remember when she left, I remember, oh my God, I broke down. I was like, oh my God, like what's gonna happen? Ah. And then I remember my husband getting home and me just like crying. I remember that I cried so much. And then I just had to, pick myself up and be like, you know what, Kiara, it's okay. We're gonna get through this. And thank goodness it's early so we can find the right supports that he needs, and and we're gonna get through this. And since then I just started, I remember that early on I had those little concerns, like, oh my God, like what's gonna happen when he grows up? Like, is he gonna have friends? Is he going to like to socialize? Like
Mm-hmm.
what his life is going to look like, and just thinking about school and how there's a lot of kids that can be bullies in school, and like all those worries come up, still to today it comes up a little bit. I just really, I'm very involved parent when it comes to school, so I make sure that I'm the teacher's best friend. So I can so I can communicate with him often and just know how he's doing. But it hit me hard at first, and then as time was passing, I had to make a lot of changes in his diet. It was just a lot of research too, to just understand more about it in him.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, so it hit me hard at first, but then I had to like get up and be like, okay, we cannot stay in this negative thinking, so it goes back to the mind, right? We have to really expect the best and prepare for the worst, but at the end of the day we have to keep on moving. We have to get him the help he needs, and rogarle a Dios que todo salga bien siempre.
Of course. Yeah, that I posted something today, and it's going back to what you were saying. It's like the earlier you get help, the better. This is what I want to urge the comadres. Like, if you have a
Yes.
suspicion,
Oh my God, yeah.
anything, just advocate for your child, and get them evaluated. The worst that they can say is like, no, you're crazy. Not you're crazy, obviously, but no, you're being a new mom.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong. Your child is fine, whatever.
Mhm.
But if you have a suspicion, please act on that. Like, go ahead and advocate for your child. And then the other thing I wanted to ask, go ahead, Kiara.
No, I just even wanted to say your to the comadres also, right? Because a lot of us as parents, we have this stigma about mental health, and it's big. And honestly, we do our children a disservice when we don't get them evaluated. Because I work with a lot of adults who have been just recently diagnosed with either ADHD and even autism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a painful road for them, because it's just so difficult. It's so difficult to imagine living with autism but not knowing that you have that. That, I mean, it's so difficult for them as adults. you know and the earlier, like you were mentioning, the earlier you get help for anything, the better it would be for that person. So I know that at times it can be really hard for us, and also realizing for us as parents that it's more us than them. We are the
Yeah.
ones that are scared. We are the ones that are nervous. We are the ones, but at the end of the day, we have to set those fears to a side and realize that our children are also humans, and they need the help. They need to get the help they need in order to be successful, as adults. We're
Mm-hmm.
not always going to be here with them. So listen, as early as you can get them any help, get it for them. Because I always say, I look back today and I'm like, yo, I wish I was in therapy. I would have been in therapy earlier in life, because
Yes.
I would have figured out a lot of shit
Mm-hmm. Early.
before, early on, right? So, do that for your children as well. They deserve it. And, you know, check yourselves, check ourselves. We got to check ourselves first, because it is more of our fears.
And our ego.
Yep, getting in the way of things that, would be helpful for our children.
And I'm gonna just in the educational standpoint too, it's like, when you're driving, and like a rock hits your windshield, and it's like just that little imperfection at the beginning, but then like if you don't get it taken care of, it keeps going down and down, and
Cracking.
eventually it'll crack your entire window.
Right.
It's the same thing educationally, right? Or therapy wise, right? The
Mm-hmm.
faster, the earlier you get the help, the less therapy or the less intervention you'll need. Like the more time that you spend, it's harder to catch a child up to typically developing peers when that child is in fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier when a child is 18 months to give them the help that they need so that and teach them the adaptive skills to be, as close to their typically neurotypical peers as possible rather than wait until they're already almost in junior high school.
Yeah.
I had a child like that. I got evaluated and you know, they got a diagnosis, an IEP in fifth grade.
Yeah.
You're going to a completely different school.
Mhm.
Like for me as a teacher, as a special education teacher,
Yeah.
like it's hard to think about what their life is going to be like. Not that they're not going to have a good quality of life, but I'm just saying, like, educationally, education services, like, it's not going to be the same. And the
Yeah.
older they get, the less services they receive.
Right, right. And it's difficult. And it's difficult. It's difficult to sometimes accept, right, that there could be something going on. But, paying attention to teachers' feedback is important because remember that the teachers also see a side of our children that we don't get to see.
Hmm.
And that's the part that a lot of parents, that we as parents, because I even include myself, we don't accept sometimes. And the reality is that no, a lot of teachers will see teachers and peers and even babysitters, daycare centers. They're going to see a part of your children that you do not see because remember, they're totally different people outside.
Yeah, a lot of parents are combative. Like, I don't feel some with certain parents, I don't feel comfortable bringing it up because it just makes them. And I remember at first, like, I used to be like, my kid, not my kid, but you have to put the ego aside and kind of like really listen to
Yeah.
what the experts have to say, and it's hard. I like I shared in the episode that aired this week was like I started crying. I started hysterically crying. Like, I was like devastated.
Yeah.
And that's normal, but you have to put your big underwear on, your adult
Hmm.
underwear on, and, like, do what's best for your child, because at the end of the day, you have to give yourself, you have the responsibility of putting an adult out there that's going to be able to adapt to their environment and be a participating member of society.
Absolutely.
So tell me about your book, Becoming a New You. You told us a
Yes.
little bit what you covered, but, like, kind of give us the gist of it.
Yeah, so my baby book, no, it's ya está como in teenage years.
Teenage years. I
No,
mean,
no,
I
no,
saw
no.
the launch. It looked
Oh
amazing.
my goodness, yes, thank you so much. I threw a whole party to celebrate and stuff. But the book is about a guide to learning how your past can inform your present, and it really focuses a lot on some of the maladaptive coping mechanisms that we developed. And then what I did was I broke it down into sections. So I did the first four chapters are dedicated to women, but of
Hmm.
course men could also read those parts because for two reasons. One, because I want you to empathize with women and the things that we go through right during childhood and perhaps understand the reasons as to why certain things show up in the way that it shows up in our relationships, but also because I want there's also parts of those chapters that can also uh be in relation to men, right? That men
Hmm.
can also relate to. The same thing goes to the second section, which is dedicated to men, and the third section that is dedicated to couples, but also single people can read because it's more about skill. It's learning about why marriages fail and tips and coping coping mechanisms, and then I also provided questions, right? So, because I want you for each chapter to really dive in and think deeper about
Hmm.
how that showed up for you in childhood and do your own digging, right?
Hmm.
So it's also kind of like a journaling. I love journaling.
Hmm.
So I want people that are reading that are reading this book to read, but to also reflect on their own stuff and really reflect on how those things may be showing up for them in their own relationship, and also just have action, like, okay, so these are the things that are going on for you, and now you have here the strategies on how to change that for yourself. So you have the tools now, right? Like this book right here, this book right
I'm
here,
putting
right?
a link to the Amazon shop.
Thank you so much. So yeah, so this book right here, right, it I wanted people to feel seen. I wanted people to feel heard. I wanted people to feel validated when they read it, right? That it makes sense that this is going on for you. It does
Mhm.
make sense, right? We live in a world where we are constantly being invalidated. Our opinions, our thoughts, all of it. So I just wanted people to read this book and really feel connected and feel like they're actually speaking to me, right?
Mhm.
When they're reading it, but to also have the tools to change those behaviors, to improve those behaviors, because at the end of the day, we have a lot of different parts of ourselves. Some parts I know that I'm not even aware of myself, right? But we all have so many parts of ourselves, and that's okay. What's not okay if it's we're not aware of them, because then we can't change those things, right?
Yeah.
So if we are honest with ourselves, if we're transparent with ourselves, if we're able to say, you know what, yeah, I can be a little bit manipulative in my relationship, then you're able to control that part of you.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly saying, no, Joe, I'm not no manipulator, what are you talking about? We would never be able to improve, because I always say, when my couples are going back and forth in my sessions, I typically say, okay, but hold on, don't you want to learn about yourself?
Yeah.
And they look at me like, what? And I'm like, I know it's really hard to hear right now, but aren't you curious to hear about why she's feeling the way she is? Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing that is making her feel that way? That's what we want to learn right now, right?
Mhm.
And really make people have to like sit there in a way that is still feel safe, right? Because also the speaker, right? So she would have to really speak in a way that he could hear it, right?
Yeah.
Or she could hear it. So really learning how to sit and listen and take feedback, because it's so important. But this book right here, my darlings, will provide you with some answers and some help and some support.
And today we're filming on the day before Independent bookshop day. So go get it at a independent bookshop.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, and then last question before we end the session, and that is, what does self-care look like for you?
Self-care look like for me. Listen, doing my nails. It's a thing. Look, una se me rompió. I have one broken one, so I have to go tomorrow. Doing my nails, doing my hair is actually a self care for me, because that's a whole that is a whole situation.
For the people that are not looking at the YouTube chat, the YouTube video, she has amazing, beautiful curly hair. It's
Thank you.
very luscious.
Thank you
It's a
so much.
it's a luscious mane.
Thank you so much. So as you can see, this is another thing that has to be done this weekend. My hair. So doing my hair, spending time with the kids, watching movies with them, spending time with my husband. That's another way that I like really like take care of myself. I also do journaling. I feel like another way of taking care of myself is by giving myself time to reflect on the stuff that I'm not doing really good at. So like if I'm feeling like my patience is running really low with the kids, I sit and I'm like, okay, what's going on? Like, where's this coming from? Because it's not them, right?
Yeah.
Something else is happening for me that it's making me this anxious, or making me this, kind of reactive. What is it? So I feel like that's another part of me taking care of myself, because I learned that if I don't take care of myself, who's going to take care of myself? Because nobody else is taking care of, no one, no one's going to take care of me the way that I take care of me, you know?
Yes.
So I take care of myself to make sure that I'm also the best mom that I can be, the best wife that I can be, and the best therapist that I can be to my clients, honestly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much. This was such a good conversation,
Oh
Kiara.
my
Thank you so much
gosh.
for coming on the show.
Yes.
And shout out to Jose from Trilo for connecting
Yeah.
us,
Whoop, whoop.
and just putting us in each other's paths. So, comadres, I'm gonna end the show how I usually end it, which is follow me at Comadreando Pod on Instagram, and you can follow Kiara on IG at
Mrs. Kiara Luna.
okay. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to send me a Comadre-Gram via email at comadreando@escthenetwork.com, or slide up into my DMs. And I want to thank you for spending an afternoon with your comadres. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, comadre.
Hey, comadre.
Do you have a minute for comadre time?